Turns out, sleep quality. Across age and sex. Your brain is literally wiring itself differently while you sleep. Right now. Every single night. And depending on whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're 25 or 65, those wires are reorganizing in completely opposite ways. Researchers just discovered that the same terrible night's sleep hits your brain differently depending on who you are. So here's the question. What if the sleep advice everyone keeps giving you is actually backwards? Sleep matters. We know this. It matters for memory, for your immune system, for basically every thought you'll have tomorrow. And we've known for years that bad sleep gets worse as you age. It also hits men and women differently. But here's what neuroscientists didn't know until recently. The actual brain mechanisms underlying that difference were almost completely mysterious. They had theories. They had hunches. But nobody had mapped out exactly how a bad night's sleep reorganizes the networks in your brain, and whether that reorganization looks the same across age groups and sexes. That gap in knowledge was the whole reason this study existed. This research came from a team led by researchers at the University of Alabama and Binghamton University. The paper hit Neurobiology of Aging in 2026, authored by Tan, Gourabi, Cribbet, and McDonough. These aren't household names, but these are people who spent years staring at brain scans, asking a simple question. When sleep quality tanks, which part of your brain changes, and does it change the same way for everyone? That question led them somewhere genuinely surprising. Here's how they actually did it. They took two separate groups of people. One group had 95 participants. The second group had 1,244. For the smaller group, they ran detailed brain imaging, functional MRI scans. They also measured something called resting state functional connectivity. Think of it like watching how different neighborhoods in a city stay connected even when nothing is actively happening. The city isn't moving, but the phone lines, the highways, the communication networks are still humming. That's what they're measuring in your brain. They focused on two specific brain networks. The default mode network. That's the system that fires up when you're daydreaming, remembering, thinking about yourself. The salience network. That's your alarm system, your attention filter. It decides what matters and what you can ignore. They asked people to rate their sleep quality. Then they looked for patterns. Did better sleep correlate with stronger connections between these networks? Weaker ones? And crucially, did the answer change depending on age and sex? The results were genuinely bizarre. Let's start with women. In younger women, poor sleep quality correlated with weaker connections between the default mode network and a region called the superior parietal lobule. That sounds technical. What it means, their brain networks were less chatty with each other. They were siloed. But here's where it gets weird. In older women, the exact same problem, poor sleep quality, correlated with stronger connections. Hyperconnectivity. Their networks were too chatty, too synchronized. And that excessive synchronization predicted worse episodic memory. The ability to remember specific events just tanked. This matters because hyperconnectivity in those exact same networks shows up in people with preclinical Alzheimer's disease. People who haven't developed symptoms yet, but are on the path. So you've got older women whose brains are responding to sleep deprivation in a way that looks like early cognitive decline. Same trigger, opposite brain response, different outcomes. The salience network told a different story, but an equally interesting one. Age mattered. The relationship between sleep quality and salience network connectivity shifted across the lifespan. The pattern wasn't simple. It wasn't a straight line. It was more like a curve, changing direction at different ages depending on sex. Now here's what this actually means for your life. If you're a woman in your 30s and you're sleeping poorly, your brain is probably compensating. It's trying to work harder to do the same job. You might feel it as brain fog or slower thinking, but your brain is attempting a workaround. If you're a woman in your 60s with the same sleep problem, your brain might be doing the opposite, locking in too tight, creating too much internal synchronization. And that lock could be steering you toward the kinds of patterns we see in Alzheimer's patients. The practical implication is ruthless. A sleep problem doesn't hit everyone the same. It doesn't hit men and women the same. It doesn't even hit a 30-year-old woman and a 70-year-old woman the same. One-size-fits-all sleep advice is probably garbage for most people. But there's something important to say about limitations here. These are correlations, not causation. The study shows that sleep quality and brain connectivity are linked. It doesn't prove that bad sleep causes the brain changes. It could go the other way. Brain changes could be causing sleep problems. Probably it's bidirectional. Also, this is relatively small for neuroscience. 1,244 people sounds huge. But brain imaging studies are expensive. They're labor-intensive. This is actually a solid sample. But it's still not 1 million people. The findings need replication. They need follow-up studies that track the same people over years to see if those brain changes actually predict cognitive decline. This is the beginning of an answer, not the final one. Which brings us to the bigger picture. For decades, sleep neuroscience treated sex and age as confusing variables. Annoying demographic noise. They controlled for them statistically, tried to make them disappear. But this study treats them as central. This study says, these aren't confounds. These are the point. The entire mechanism might hinge on age and sex differences. And if that's true, then every sleep study, every sleep intervention, every sleep therapy needs to be redesigned with age and sex as fundamental organizing principles. That's not happening yet. Most sleep clinics still hand out the same advice to everyone. The same sleep hygiene tips, the same recommendations. But if your brain is wired to respond to sleep deprivation completely differently than your neighbor's brain based on age and sex, then generic advice is almost certainly suboptimal, maybe harmful. This research is saying we need personalized sleep medicine, sex-specific sleep medicine, age-informed sleep medicine. Here's the most mind-blowing part of all this. Your sleep quality today might be reshaping the neural networks that determine whether you develop dementia in 20 years. Not just affecting how tired you are tomorrow, actually changing the fundamental architecture of how your brain organizes information. And that reorganization happens differently depending on who you are. The same terrible night could push you toward cognitive decline or create compensatory strength. Everything depends on whether you're male or female, how old you are, when it started. The stakes couldn't be higher. So the question becomes, if bad sleep hits your brain differently based on age and sex, does that mean the sleep that's good for you is also different? Turns out scientists have been busy, and they're not done yet.